why do you need to record it? Like what?
Why?
Your map.
Of what interest is it? Of what interest is it when we examine the conversation between ourselves? Is because it creates a reflection. When we put it on video, we create another kind of reflection. Creates access, creates conversation, creates.
Okay, so it helps you map direction too, right?
I think so. Like every time you have another vantage point on a question that is of some central value, like this one is, I think the more formats you put it in, the more likelihood that you're gonna deepen your appreciation of it. And I think for me, part of the discipline is more than trying to explain it to people, is just to experience it and let people have that demonstration and provide conditions by where they can experience as well, which is why we have things like which you're performing a social research where you're asking people this question. But for me, what I wanted to ask you is, for a couple of months, we had talked about this a couple of months back, and it sounded like when we talked again, it had sort of been in the back of your mind for that period of time. You'd thought about it afterwards. And I was curious how that happened, what that was like for you.
Well, I remember a sports psychologist saying that if you're training for the Olympics, right, then you have to look at what you're doing. Every single thing you do, if you're a rower, will it make the boat go faster? I remember the people in France when they're racing in the Vendée Globe, these 60-foot boats solo around the world. Mm-hmm. The guy who wrote the book on it, he said they were clipping the stem off their toothbrush because that was extra weight. Wow. That's how stupid it went. So right. when I'm thinking about this, I think, is there enough? And you put a seed in the head, and I'm saying, well, do I need this brand new oven, or will a $900 one be good enough?
Well, so let me ask you, let me ask you this. So like, what is your response when you see this question now? Never mind how you might have seen it a couple months ago.
Well, nothing's changed from the point of view of, we're all cognizant that other people are not as fortunate as we are.
Okay.
The gap here is, what do we do about it? Okay. Do I put more pennies in my UNICEF box once a year on Halloween? Right. Do I donate when I see an ad on Oxfam? Do I wait till the year end? Like, is it about money going to some organization?
That is a fair question about, what do you do about it? Because just simply raising the question of, is there enough? If you just ask that question, there wouldn't really be any utility to it. No. But it does happen to seem that once you get past the general response to, is there enough, it becomes clear that there's not enough of everything. There are some things that are scarce, a lot less of them than we think when we really look at it. But whether they're scarce, not enough, or whether they're plentiful, that they are enough, it leads to that question that you just said. So when people ask me sometimes about this conversation, I'll say it's basically a conversation about both personal and social responsibility, hand in hand. Personal and social responsibility hand in hand is what this is about. And essentially what I would say is whatever you're going to do about it will either happen or not by whether agreement was made.
I get it. Those are the fine points. But, like any marketing, it was always awareness, interest, decision, action. And so
fair.
Once you get a few decisions, a few, you get the awareness, and we have the awareness. Like eventually you'll come to this everyone's going to agree there may be enough, but we have a problem. It's not whether there's enough, there's a problem.
Which is, how do you define that problem?
Well, the problem is that we all know there's a problem, but we're not doing enough about it because we're in our day job.
What is that problem we all know about it?
We're aware of starvation, we're aware of hunger, and we change the channel.
So let me ask you this question then. So do you think it only works on a global level, or can I assume that it also works on a personal level too, when you ask this style of question and you look at what can you do about it,
well,
like in your
you're not
relationship or your business or your friendships or whatever it is?
It has to work on the personal, because there's just as this fellow said quite rightly, it's been bugging me since high school.
Right.
He's living
works on a personal level.
He's living with an unsolved problem residing in his brain.
Which is?
The discomfort that he's doing what he needs for his family, but he's not doing enough. He doesn't have an answer or a direction or a structure
on how to make life better for everybody else.
Yeah, without even the question of whether it affects his own livelihood. It's not even about money. I have a choice that I can make to impact what gets written there.
What do you think is in the not enough category?
Organization.
Okay.
Organization. And the not enough category, you're talking, we can only speak for ourselves, but obviously we wouldn't have this conversation if we thought everybody had enough. So, we have worries beyond ourselves.
So let me see if I'm catching that. So we wouldn't be having this conversation unless we knew that there were some people who didn't have enough. So essentially what you're saying there's not enough of, I would translate that into is there's not enough inclusion. Because if there's enough, but not everybody is enjoying it, then we have an issue of how we create more inclusion. It would seem to me. So it would seem to me, speaking mathematically.
Well, let's just put it this way: if I have to go downstairs and I turn the tap on and there's water there 24/7, I'm way ahead of someone who has to walk with the 2 buckets on their head 3 miles and hope that they don't get raped on their way back home, and someone takes their buckets twice a day.
So I guess the question is, what do you do about it?
Right. And we all know there's something like this going on. You don't have to go to Africa. You can go to a reservation here where they got mercury in their water, right? Like, there are problems. It isn't happening. The solutions aren't happening fast enough. And by the structure of the way we organize and govern ourselves, it won't happen fast. It can't.
So, the whole question we're asking is, agreement is what creates wealth, not resources, but people are not very good at agreement. As I look at it culturally, I can't find a country on earth that's not at war with itself. Can't find one.
All right. I want a solution. I don't need to be, I'm not a dreamer. I'm not a dream of a solution. And so cut to the mustard. And what are we going to do about all these people? We're not going to teach them philosophy. This is my practical.
Not at all. But we're not teaching them philosophy when we're teaching them how to make agreement. We're teaching them how to put bread and butter on the friggin' table. Everything that people want to do, be, or have is going to be based on their capability of making agreement.
Okay.
Right?
Good.
That's not a philosophy to simply recognize that we do come from 70,000 years of war, and you don't just turn that off like that. I mean, the language you and I grew up in and the culture you and I grew up in, our fathers, their dream was to make a lot of money. And then once they, earn the money thing, then they could be a philanthropist at the end of their lives. That was that generation for good moral people, right? And it was like, go to war in business, rub out the other guy and then be a benefactor. All of our livingry, as Buckminster Fuller said, comes from weaponry first, right? We have the internet, which is created from weaponry. We have the steel plow is created after the steel sword. You have the atomic energy out of the atomic bomb. It's always an offshoot of war. War is where our highest technology went for most of the 20th century. We're beginning to change that right now. And that's not just philosophy. It's to say that if a kid in an underprivileged circumstance wants to be able to, know the language of the world, they need to be taught how to make agreement in order to get ahead, not just for the benefit of the world, for themselves personally, because that's how wealth gets created. And basically all the experiences, from the social survey to the self-survey to the ambassador program to the treaty itself, are all exercises in an agreement academy with the theory that people can create wealth by agreement, not wait for it to be handed or given to them. It's not about distribution and evening out the sides between you having more than enough and somebody else not having enough. It's about them being able to make agreement to do so. And one of the characteristics that's so interesting about this is when, because this Is There Enough thing was sort of an accidental conversation from me speaking with investors and creating a reason for them to invest in impact investing and create that case. But once Is There Enough became something like a hashtag, and I wanted to basically claim it, I went to create a hashtag with a question mark in it called "Is there enough?" and discovered I can't put a question mark in the hashtag. And what I began to look at is that the language that we use online is very different characteristically than when we meet people offline. And more importantly, by having no question in the conversation. I mean, a hashtag is like, this is the name of the conversation. You can't put a question mark in it, which basically means linguistically, people are just shoving facts at each other. And if you don't agree with my facts, I'm just going to lock you out of the conversation because you're no longer.
Yeah, I remember your frustration a couple of years back.
So I guess my thing is the conversation that creates agreement is not that conversation. The conversation that creates agreement where agreement didn't happen before has to open with a question. It has to. Like when you're going to do business with a customer, you don't just shove a product at them. You want this size or that size? Have you ever used one of these before? Do you have a budget? That whole thing, right? There's no way to create an agreement there without a question. And people don't know how to do that in a social sphere online because we've created a limitation.
Oh no! First of all, they think they're anonymous with their name next to themselves.
That's true.
They really believe they can launch a scud and be holier than be a big shot. Sure. Because they were squished in their day job from 9 to 5. Now they're muscle men.
That's a big factor. That's a big factor, and we don't help it at all by making questions such a special character. It should be centrally part of conversation, particularly if you're trying to improve things. If you're trying to keep the status quo, you don't need any questions.